Now let's look at the checks to be carried out on the cylinder head components. Any removed component must be carefully cleaned prior to inspection. You must first carry out the following checks relating to the cylinder head gasket. Measure the thickness of the cylinder head gasket at the point specified in the technical documentation. Check that there are no tears or large cracks. And lastly, check that there are no large deposits of carbon. The cylinder head conformity check is done via the following checks. Measurement of the flatness using a ruler and a set of feeler gauges. Measurement of the height using the recommended measuring devices. And lastly, a cylinder head test to check that there are no cracks using pressure equipment. Now let's look at checking the valves. You must first check that there are no signs of wear, overheating and seizure on the valve stem. You must then carry out the following dimensional measurements. The diameter of the valve stem or valve guide, as well as the lateral clearance using a dial gauge, the diameter of the valve head, the valve length, the valve head angles, Now let's look at the wear value for the valve return springs. You must measure the total length of the spring at rest using a vernier gauge, sliding caliper. Lastly, you must measure the spring wear using a spring setting tool and check that the value is within the recommended tolerance. Checking the sealing of the valve seats is done as follows. First, you must tip the fuel into the cavity where the valves are located. Then, check that there is no fuel in the area of the valve stems. Measurement of valve recess is performed using a special tool equipped with a dial gauge. You must check that the measurement obtained for each valve is within the recommended tolerance. The measurement must be taken over the valve head as close as possible to its shaft. Now let's look at the camshaft checks. First of all, you must check that there are no signs of wear, overheating and seizure relating to the cams and the bearings. The first dimensional check is the measurement of the diameter of the bearings and the height of the cams using a micrometer. The second check consists of measuring the camshaft runout using the appropriate number of V's and a dial gauge fitted on its support. You must then measure the internal diameter of the camshaft bearings. Lastly, you must check the lateral clearance of the camshafts after having refitted them to the cylinder head.